Welcome back, everyone, to the Automotive Market Minute, in which may or may not take just over a minute. My name is Steven Jurgella.
My name is Philip Trzebiatowski.
And I'm James Sivko.
All right, guys, Trump is in. It's now the Gulf of America. Straws are no longer breaking down in your Shirley Temple. And man, do we have one hell of an episode for you. And it's a little bit in reverse. I'm amped up. First of all, NAFTA abuse. We've been being abused. There's tariff uncertainty in the market. It's showing in consumer sentiment, and we are going to show you the reasons why you should chill the F out. We're going to talk about the factors impacting that consumer sentiment, Fountain Forward, and national dealership performance. And then, sure enough, a mailbag showed up on our front door, and Mr. James Sivko and Phil Trzebiatowski are going to unpack that and much more. And with that said, I will let the Brainiacs go ahead and take over. I'll take a back seat. Gentlemen, you have the show.
All right, well, tariffs are nothing new. Before we invented the IRS to finance our economy, we actually financed the American economy in the first half of our republic exclusively through tariffs. That ended in World War II, where we decided to cut our duties to help finance Europe. That was 80 years ago, and we forgot to reverse that policy. So it reverses now. And if you look at what's in store for us, we're jumping from near zero to something between 5 and 8%. So not a very big movement here. There's the number, maybe 12%, depending on what kind of a mood he's in. But really, the game is rigged against us when it comes to moving goods around the world. And unfortunately, the document that is at the center of that is NAFTA. NAFTA gets abused. Europe and Asia send products to Canada and Mexico, where the finishing touches are put upon them, and then they sneak them across the border. And then there's even this little arrow that we put here, this little U, where we even get in on the act. So we bake the cake 80% of the way, and then put it in the oven for the finishing touches, slap the doors on, and sling them back across the Rio Grande again. And how big is that? Well, it's actually pretty big. So if we just focus on Mexico itself.
Hecho en Mexico.
Yeah, well said. That's right. This is in millions. And so you add all these up, and this is a pretty big slug of 15. If we're doing 15 million, 16 million cars a year, add all those numbers up, and that's a pretty big piece of the puzzle. 77% of Mexican exports, no matter what they are, come to the U.S. It's about 36% of their economy. And if you add remittances, another 15% of sending cash from here back there, it's 51% of their economy. The Canadian economy is no better. 75% of their exports, or a third of their GDP, is just stuff being sent to the U.S. This has got to stop, and this is why the administration is here. These are U.S. jobs that have been exported south of the border, and this is just an illustration of that. Taking a look at the U.S. dollar, since the election, it shot up 5%, which is really interesting because that means that if it's not tariffed, right, everyone's worried about all the inflation of, hey, if there's a 10% tariff on cars and 25% on steel and aluminum, the price of those products go up. Well, what adjusts? The currency adjusts. The dollar shot up. So other things that aren't tariffed, like coffee and sugar and other goods, those are going to go down by 5%. And so that's just kind of one market self-correcting mechanism that may not make this a big a deal as people are making it out to be.
Now, with consumer sentiment, with the tariffs that have been going on, there's been a lot of chaos about tariffs. When are they going to hit? We have seen consumer sentiment ultimately decline briefly and slightly in January, down 0.1% in January. That ended a 6-month increase to end of the second half of 2024, and it declined 3.2% as of last Monday, leaving it down 1.7% so far in February. It was the worst week since last April. Also, what happened in January of 2025, we saw 0% and less than 3% APR incentives fall down. They were at the highest point that they had in the last 12 months in December of 24. In January, we saw the OEMs and manufacturers axe a lot of the incentives that they did have available in December.
So something I'm going to add here, which will be in 2 slides from now, it's going to directly correlate to this slide. So I want you to look at that nice red arrow on the left and that nice red arrow on the right. And I want you to remember that for 2 slides from now when we go over the aggregate performance of our dealers.
But something else happened in January. We saw average auto loan rates for both new and used spike back up. the average new auto loan rate was up 62 basis points to 9.26%, up from 8.64% in December. It is still lower than the peak that occurred in mid-June of 2024. That peaked at about 10% again in mid-June. Now, the average used auto loan rate, that increased by 53 basis points up to 13.93% from 13.4% in December. Again, that is lower year over year by about 27 basis points, and the average used auto loan rate peaked at 14.59% in February of last year.
So in the month of January, we saw this drop in performance when it came down to sales. You could say it's flat as it pertains to used cars. This is month over month. You can see the year over year as well. And then very much down when it comes down to new sales. Now, you saw that slide 2 slides ago talking about factory support in 2024 versus factory support in 2025. Now, we've had a lot of discussions on our bi-weekly webinars with our partners at Allen Ram Proactive Training Solutions talking about salespeople's performance. Well, let's go ahead and look back to 2024 versus this year. Well, if you look at what happened 2024 January versus December 2023, what you saw is you saw new lead volume versus December down about 12%, and then you saw new sales down about 22%. Well, what happened this year? Lead volume was fine. It was actually up when it comes to month over month December versus January, but new sales fell off the planet, down 19.2%. And so you could say, finally, December had this little uptick. There was more new inventory. There was more new incentives. Was this a hangover, if you will? Did we extract as much juice out of the market as possible? And now, gosh, we had less factory support. We have this down mood because everybody, and this is why I mentioned the sales staff, everybody in sales, unfortunately, goes, it's January, it's February, it's the worst 2 months of the year. Everybody knows it's the worst 2 months. Well, here's the deal. The opportunity was actually up month over month. There's actually more. The December to remember, you had a January to remember. The opportunities are there. So we'll see what incentives look like in the month of February to see how much support you had or did not have from the factory. But something to keep in mind, speaking to the salespeople, speaking to the sales managers, the nurture cycle. These opportunities didn't go away. These are people that are in the market looking for a vehicle. Let's say the buying cycle, let's say we can agree that it's 60 days. Well, that's only 30 of them. Now we're on to the month of February. We should be grinding, realizing the fact that those people waved at us and said, hi, I'm in market. Yes, you can use the excuse, that the factories gave you less support. Heard loud and clear. But there are still people that are saying, hi, I want to get a new vehicle. And maybe they get in there, they get into finance, and they're like, hey, as it shows with appointments only being down 0.5%, they're getting into the building, assuming the show rate was the same. They're getting into the building and you can't close the deal. Okay, nurture those people to close. That's the best thing you can do. And by the way, are those people or are they not? Have they already been past the barrier to entry? The answer is yes. They've already communicated with you. They've most likely been to your store or they've at least set an appointment. So now is the time to hammer down because there's no additional cost. The cost is already sunk. So go ahead and double down on those people. So that's something that I want you to keep in mind. January of last year versus December, down 22%. January this year versus December last year, down 19.2%. The story is the same. We can't just go and forget what just happened last year. It's right there in front of our face. So for the dealers that are panicking, the numbers are very, very clear. The market waved and said, hi, I'm still interested to buy a vehicle. I'm a little bit apprehensive, and you lost some support from the factory. Oh, well, the opportunities are there and you don't have to go and pay extra for them.
From a national perspective, we see this ring true as well. Retail vehicle sales have followed what we call normal seasonal patterns in early 2025, like Steve just mentioned. For the last 3 weeks to end January, new sales fell. It's typical for a new year, as you can see by the last couple of years. Now, still year over year, new retail sales are up about 10% over 2024, regaining some of the strength that we did see to end 2024. Now, on the used side, the used retail market, we have seen transactions move higher, up almost 5% over the last week and up 15% against 2024. Now, if we take a look back in December of 24, and past Decembers, we do often see used sales typically decline in December. That didn't happen this December. The fact that they just stayed flat from week to week and then increased in the back half of January indicates that there's some strong demand for used vehicles.
There's also the new vehicles. They've continued to go up and up and up in price. Yes, there's a couple of brands such as Stellantis. The Grand Wagoneer is a great example. There are prices coming down. So there's some price relief, if you will, coming from the factory. But in my opinion, it's going to be more of, we'll keep prices fairly the same. And so it'll feel like more relief as a year or two goes down the passes. And James, I don't know if you have any other feedback on that or any opinion on that, but it doesn't really feel like factories are going to come in and pull back on their prices. It seems they would do, number one, they would hold prices, or number two, they would increase their incentives. James, Mr. Economist, how am I doing there?
Yes, one, the other, or both.
Yes is the answer. Okay, good.
Looking at new inventory came in at 2.91 million units. That is up about 15.5% against last year. It still remains down about 20% compared to 2019. Days supply down about 8% compared to 2019. New days supply is now sitting at 87.2 days, about 5% higher than last year. And if we look at the used inventory fell to about 2.19 million units. That's now down 5% against 2024. Now, looking at used day supply, that declined by about 6% down to 46.6 days. That is now about 10 days lower than last year, about 17.2%. So that used vehicle market is quite hot right now. So James, from the mailbag.
So that brings us to the next slide here. Steven, what do you think this Google search trend was for the repositioning of the Kia brand in 2021, 2022?
For those that don't know, they're dropping this on me. So I don't actually know the answer here. Trying to think, recalls, big issues.
Consumers.
I don't think there were any of those. Those are my best guesses. I don't think there were any of those that stood out. So what the hell is it?
This giant search impulse, this massive move that got up to 1,000 consumers a day, 30,000 consumers a month, they were searching for KN car.
The logo.
Because it's so confusing. It just says KN car, and everyone was like, what's this thing that I'm sitting behind?
Oh, man. I'm going to assume the brainiacs at Kia knew this. So they're going to go. They know that people are going to type it in. They're going to SEO the site. They're going to gobble up all the traffic, create the demand.
They had to know, because if you look at Google Trends now for KN car, it matches up with everything that a consumer shopping for a Kia would search for. So they had to know, and they needed something for the consumers to engage with their brand, and hats off, it worked. We can Monday morning quarterback this thing 4 years later. I think it worked.
So takeaways from here, first and foremost, NAFTA was being abused. So it's worth realizing the impacts of what is to come, if you will. Second of all, straws will not be breaking down in any Shirley Temples going forward. It seems as if Kia is playing chess and we are all playing checkers. That's what I took away from that. But most importantly, God willing, we will have another Automotive Market Minute next month. On behalf of my colleagues, James Sivko and Bill Trzebiatowski, my name is Steven Jurgella. This is the Automotive Market Minute, and we will see you next month. See ya.